The chamber was alive with noise, voices overlapping in a battle of wills, the air thick with tension that refused to settle. Papers rustled, whispers carried, and then, like a thunderclap, Matt Gaetz pushed forward. His jaw was clenched tight, his voice raised above the din, slicing through the chamber with the sharpness of accusation. Every word rolled out heavy, meant not to persuade, but to dominate, to make his presence impossible to ignore. The cameras caught it all. The swagger in his stride, the heat in his glare, the practiced tone of a man who believed volume was victory. For a moment, it seemed he might seize control of the room, bending the energy to his will through sheer force of noise. But across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, her face calm, her eyes steady. She did not flinch, did not scramble to match his fury. Instead, she held her ground with a quiet strength that spoke louder than his shouts. Her stillness became a mirror, reflecting his bluster back at him, stripping away the power he thought he held. The contrast was unmistakable: chaos versus composure, arrogance versus dignity. But no one could predict how her reply would flip the room upside down. Matt Gaetz wasn't just another lawmaker raising his voice. He was a figure who carried controversy into every room he entered. Known for chaos, for bluster over substance, for the endless trail of investigations and headlines that clung to his name, Gaetz had become the embodiment of America's political circus. His reputation wasn't built on reasoned debate, but on disruption, on a kind of theater that thrived on volume and spectacle. And here, in this chamber, he leaned on that same performance, expecting it to cow his opponent into silence. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't the opponent he imagined. Rising quickly through the ranks, she had carved a reputation for being calm under fire, a progressive voice who brought both sharp intellect and unshakable dignity to every exchange. For many watching, she represented something larger than herself. The new guard of politics, one rooted in inclusion, empathy, and strength forged through struggle. The clash unfolding wasn't just Gaetz versus Crockett. It was arrogance versus dignity. It was a test of whether America's politics would continue rewarding noise, or whether calm clarity could break through. Viewers felt the weight of that symbolism. To Crockett's supporters, she wasn't only defending her right to speak, she was defending the right of every silenced voice to be heard. To Gaetz's base, this was another opportunity to rally around spectacle. And in the middle, millions of Americans who were tired of the shouting leaned forward, sensing this moment might be different. Because what was about to happen wasn't destined to fade into the background noise of politics. This wasn't a clip to be forgotten by tomorrow's news cycle. What happened next wouldn't just trend, it would define Crockett's voice. Matt Gaetz entered Congress not as a quiet public servant, but as a spectacle in motion. From the very beginning, headlines seemed to chase him like shadows. Investigations into his conduct, questions about his ethics, stories that blurred the line between politics and scandal. For his supporters, the drama made him a warrior against the establishment. For his critics, it was proof that chaos had found its loudest champion. Either way, Gaetz cultivated notoriety with a practiced hand, wielding it as both shield and sword. What set him apart was not mastery of policy or depth of vision, but his ability to dominate a room through sheer volume. He understood the modern political stage as theater, and his role was clear: disrupt, overwhelm, and outshout. In hearings, in interviews, in speeches on the House floor, he relied on bluster to drown out reason. His interruptions became his signature, his raised voice a weapon designed to unnerve opponents and seize control of the narrative. That pattern, using noise to fill the gaps where substance faltered, made Gaetz an archetype of arrogance. He embodied the old political order that believed power meant talking over others, that the louder voice was the truer one, that domination by sound was the same as winning by argument. It was a performance built not for persuasion, but for intimidation. And for years it worked. Opponents stumbled, debates collapsed under the weight of his interruptions, and headlines rewarded the chaos. He became a fixture in the media precisely because he knew how to provoke, how to turn every exchange into a clash, every disagreement into a spectacle. But theatrics can only carry so far. Behind the volume lay fragility, a reliance on noise that crumbled when met with composure. What Gaetz had perfected was a strategy that depended on rattling the other side. Without that reaction, without the chaos he thrived on, his arsenal suddenly looked thin. And in Jasmine Crockett, he found the opponent who would not give him what he wanted. Her stillness became the counterpoint to his volume, her calm the answer to his arrogance. For the first time, Gaetz's noise was about to meet a voice it could not shake. Long before Jasmine Crockett ever stepped into the chamber where Matt Gaetz raised his voice, her path had been forged in the crucible of struggle. She was not born into privilege or handed power by entitlement. Her story was one of relentless determination, of carving a place in spaces where people like her were often told they didn't belong. Her journey began in the neighborhoods where inequality wasn't an abstract talking point, but a daily reality. She saw firsthand how systems overlooked the vulnerable, how families fought battles against poverty, discrimination, and neglect. Instead of turning away, she chose to step toward the fight. That choice led her into public service, not as a ladder for ambition, but as a duty to those whose voices were routinely silenced. As an attorney, Crockett became an advocate for the underserved. She defended those who had no one else to stand with them, often for little or no pay. Each case was more than a legal fight. It was a declaration that justice belonged to everyone, not just the powerful. And with every battle she fought, she carried the weight of communities that relied on her courage. The cost was not small. Entering politics meant stepping into the crosshairs of a system eager to diminish her. Smears came swiftly, attacks on her character, distortions of her record, dismissals of her competence. She faced not only the opposition of her political adversaries, but also the quiet, grinding resistance of systemic barriers built to exhaust and exclude. Yet through it all, she refused to surrender her dignity. Where others might have lashed out, Crockett chose composure. She understood that shouting would only play into the hands of those waiting to caricature her. Instead, she built her reputation on steadiness, on wielding clarity like a scalpel rather than a hammer. Her calm was not the absence of fire. It was fire under control, directed and disciplined, impossible to extinguish. That choice to embrace dignity over chaos shaped her into something more than just another lawmaker. She became a symbol for those who longed to see representation that looked like them, spoke for them, and carried their struggles into halls of power that had too often ignored them. Crockett's presence was not just political. It was personal for millions who recognized their own battles in her resilience. And so when Matt Gaetz rose with his familiar bluster, when he lunged into the chamber with noise as his weapon, Crockett did not flinch. She had been tested too many times, scarred by too many smears, strengthened by too many battles. Everything she endured prepared her for this exact moment. The chamber seemed to tighten as Matt Gaetz pressed forward, his interruptions firing one after another like a barrage designed to overwhelm. Each time Crockett began to speak, his voice cut in, sharper, louder, dripping with the kind of certainty that thrives on chaos rather than clarity. He leaned into the rhythm of disruption, pounding away at the silence, trying to fracture her composure through sheer force of noise. Reporters in the gallery exchanged glances. Staffers shifted uneasily, and even those accustomed to Washington's daily theater could feel the tension climb. It hung in the air like static before a storm, every new outburst sparking against the walls. The atmosphere was electric, not with reasoned debate, but with the collision of two starkly different approaches to power. And there was Crockett, at the eye of the storm. Her posture never wavered, her gaze never broke. While Gaetz's volume rose with each interruption, her silence grew louder still. The contrast sharpened, his chaos against her calm, his arrogance against her dignity. It was as though the chamber itself became divided into two energies, one thrashing, the other anchored, unshaken. Observers leaned forward, waiting to see if the storm would finally rattle her. But Crockett's stillness only made Gaetz's fury look more desperate, more hollow. His words were beginning to blur into noise while hers, unspoken yet, gained weight in their anticipation. The imbalance was palpable. The louder he grew, the more he revealed the cracks in his own performance. It was a scene that felt less like debate and more like a countdown, as if something monumental was about to detonate. Each interruption brought the chamber closer to breaking, each raised shout heightening the suspense of what would inevitably come. And then, in the middle of his loudest interruption yet, Crockett drew breath, her eyes steady, her voice preparing to rise above the storm. And then came the sentence that sliced through the noise. The chamber, moments before so saturated with Gaetz's volume, suddenly fell into an uneasy hush. Crockett had drawn her breath with perfect timing, letting his last interruption hang in the air like smoke from a fire that was already burning out. She didn't rush. She didn't snap back with the same frantic energy he had hurled at her. Instead, she let silence stretch, measured, deliberate, unnerving. That silence was her opening move, and it landed harder than any shout. Members shifted in their seats, heads turned toward her, waiting. The audience leaned forward, sensing that something seismic was about to be delivered. When Crockett finally spoke, her tone was low, steady, almost surgical. Each word came clean and precise, as though crafted to cut exactly where it would sting the most. She didn't match Gaetz's volume. She dismantled it. "Congressman," she began, her voice slicing through the static, "if raising your voice could replace having a point, then you might have won this debate already." A ripple moved through the chamber. Some smirked. Others tried to stifle laughter. A murmur spread across the room like a current, and even those who usually avoided reaction couldn't hide their expressions. Gaetz froze just for a moment, his jaw tightening, the rhythm of his interruptions faltering. Crockett let the pause linger again, her composure unshaken. "But shouting doesn't make your argument stronger. It only makes your desperation louder." This time the reaction was sharper. Staffers exchanged quick glances, and one could almost feel the air leave Gaetz's sails as Crockett refused to yield the floor back to him. Her calm became the weapon, each quiet pause forcing his noise to collapse into awkwardness. Gaetz shifted in his chair, his posture stiffening as if to hold together what was already cracking. His signature bravado seemed thinner, his interruptions now carrying the faint tremor of someone fighting not to lose control. Crockett pressed forward with the clarity of someone who had been waiting her entire life for moments like this. "I came here to serve the people who entrusted me with their voices. They deserve honesty. They deserve dignity. What they do not deserve is a circus act parading as leadership." Gasps, murmurs. A head in the gallery turned sharply as if to confirm what had just been said. Crockett hadn't raised her voice, yet somehow her words filled every corner of the room. And then came the final strike, delivered with the softest tone of all. "So if you think you can rattle me with noise, Congressman, you've mistaken me for someone else. I am not here to be silenced. I am here to be heard." The silence that followed was deafening. For once, Gaetz had no interruption ready, no quip sharp enough to cut back. His eyes flicked around the chamber, his jaw clenched, but the cracks in his confidence were visible. His weapon of volume had turned against him, leaving him stranded in the stillness she commanded. The chamber seemed to exhale at once, some leaning back in astonishment, others whispering furiously, phones already sliding out to capture what they knew was history in the making. Crockett had not only defended herself, she had turned the attack into a masterclass on power redefined. In that moment, Crockett didn't just respond, she rewrote the rules of the exchange. It didn't take long for the moment to escape the chamber and flood into the wider world. Within minutes, clips of Jasmine Crockett's calm dismantling of Matt Gaetz were cut, shared, and replayed across every platform. Twitter lit up first, hashtags erupting into trending territory. Calm vs chaos, Crockett calm, and the biting dollar noise is not power. The split-screen images told the story in silence. Gaetz red-faced and shouting, Crockett steady and unflinching. On TikTok, creators stitched Crockett's reply into everything from inspirational montages to comedic reenactments. The rhythm of her pause, Her precise words, the way Gaetz's face faltered, it all became meme fuel, looping endlessly with captions like, "When dignity walks into the room" and "Volume victory." Instagram reels followed suit, each clip pulling in millions of views as if the nation had been starved for exactly this kind of moment. Late-night comedy shows couldn't resist. Monologues opened with Gaetz's shouting, only to be cut off mid-yell by Crockett's calm counter. The punchline required no explanation. Arrogance had been outplayed by composure, and the audience laughed not just at Gaetz's bluster, but at the timeless simplicity of Crockett's restraint. Commentators filled the airwaves with praise, calling her performance a model of modern leadership. Activists amplified the clip as proof that dignity still had power in an era consumed by outrage. Celebrities chimed in too. Actors, musicians, athletes posting the viral video with captions celebrating Crockett's grace under fire. Each share added to the snowball effect, turning one exchange in Congress into a cultural touchstone. Meanwhile, Gaetz became the butt of the internet's relentless humor. Memes compared him to a malfunctioning microphone, to a car alarm nobody could turn off, to a storm quickly dissipated by a single ray of sunlight. What had been his attempt to dominate the chamber had instead made him a caricature of desperation. Crockett, by contrast, was elevated. She wasn't just praised for her words, but for what they represented. A refusal to be rattled, a commitment to clarity, a reminder that calm could cut deeper than chaos. For many, the moment became less about politics and more about hope, that in a world addicted to noise, dignity could still win the day. The world was watching, and this time the calm voice won. What unfolded between Matt Gaetz and Jasmine Crockett could have been dismissed as just another heated exchange in a chamber full of them. But this moment grew beyond personalities, beyond politics. It became a symbol. Gaetz embodied the familiar chaos, the conviction that shouting equates to strength. Crockett embodied something else entirely, the understanding that true power doesn't come from noise but from clarity, composure, and conviction. Her reply was more than a defense against one man's arrogance. It was a statement that dignity will always stand taller than bluster. She revealed that calm is not weakness, but discipline, not silence but strategy. Where Gaetz leaned on volume, Crockett leaned on truth, and truth requires no shouting to be heard. That resonance rippled outward, touching people far from Washington. Teachers saw themselves in her restraint, remembering classrooms where calm authority triumphed over disruption. Workers recognized her strength as the same they carried into boardrooms, factories, and service counters when dignity was the only shield against disrespect. Immigrants and women, long told to stay quiet, saw validation in her unshaken voice, proof that composure could pierce through the noise of those who would diminish them. Crockett's moment reminded America that leadership is not the loudest voice in the room, but the one that steadies it. Her stand became a mirror for a country weary of outrage and hungry for a politics rooted in integrity. And as the clip spread, as millions replayed her steady reply against Gaetz's faltering noise, a deeper truth emerged. Power is not just what is said, but how it is carried. Crockett carried it with grace, and that grace turned into strength visible to the world. In that chamber, America was reminded that silence can roar louder than shouting. Matt Gaetz attacked, but Crockett's calm reply stunned Congress and the world. What began as another attempt at domination through volume ended as a masterclass in dignity, composure, and truth. In a chamber used to noise, Jasmine Crockett proved that calm could not only endure, but prevail. Her moment was more than a viral clip. It was a reminder, plain and powerful, that arrogance may win attention for a moment, but dignity writes the lasting story. Gaetz's shouts are already fading into forgettable echoes, while Crockett's poise continues to resonate across millions of screens, inspiring those who have felt drowned out by the chaos around them. This story belongs to more than Congress. It belongs to anyone who has been talked over, dismissed, or underestimated. Crockett showed that standing firm in grace is not just resistance, it is victory. And now it's your turn. Share this story. Carry it forward. Remind the world that calm is strength, that dignity is power, that truth still matters. Subscribe, join this community, and help amplify the voices that prove leadership is not the loudest voice in the room. It's the one that endures.